dynamic and different for each mission in each area. When you talk about criminal justice, there's going to be, when you talk about running a jail or even, on some in Hamilton County, there's just so many different varieties of way we access this information and how it be used and how vital it is and mission critical. And it's 24/7. I think is a lot of the challenges. And, on the technical side, they've been around for a long time. So as the report notes is, legacy systems and, operational friction as always kind of gets in the way as well.
You're hearing Jacqueline Ray, Director of Cybersecurity at Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, describing some of the real-world scenarios public safety agencies navigate every day and why seamless, secure access is so critical to those environments. The report she referenced was conducted by Imprivata and Lexipol to better understand how prepared public safety agencies are for CJIS compliance ahead of the October 2027 deadline, and where many gaps remain in identity security and access management. Some of the stats that stood out to me were CJIS compliance is a top high priority for 79% of agencies, but only 32% report being fully compliant. So we're going to talk a little bit about that report, and I've got a guest host on with me this week. The great bearded one is out. Hope he's enjoying his summer, but we've got Nick Stohlman. Nick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Chip. Thanks for having me fill in. My name's Nick Stohlman, and I'm the VP of Strategy here for CJIS Program at Imprivata. And we've got 37 years in public safety. So it's a pleasure to be part of the team. We've obviously leaned heavily into providing CJIS compliancy to our public safety first responders out there. And I think it's important that we talk about CJIS, right, and what that really means. I think a lot of people understand CJIS is a division of the FBI that actually employs 3,000 agents and tech people that actually are responsible for setting compliancy for accessing criminal justice information throughout the country, and sometimes in international settings as well. So it's they are the ones that set compliancy and dictate to other agencies that are accessing the CGI databases that the FBI protects and manages. So they obviously play an important role, but they're also a great partner for public safety. So I think, people should look at CJIS as a partner and not, the dreaded audit. When you really look at those stats, it's really mind-boggling because we have from now until October 2027 to be compliant, are well on our way. So I think it's really important that, in talking with Jax, I thought it was really significant how she talked about how she approached it, the mission that she did. She treated it just like a mission, getting the buy-in from all the stakeholders and bringing them together and explaining, hey, this is the task at hand, and these are the things we're going to do to get compliant. And so it's a great. I really enjoyed our talk with her, and a pleasure being here today. I love filling in. Anytime I can fill in, please let me know.
Yeah, no, we love having you. You just need to grow a beard, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But that being said, so, I thought it was a great conversation too. I think, a couple things stand out to me. So first is we do have this looming deadline. We know about it. And I think most of us would say this is pretty meat and potatoes, like things that you should just be doing. And I think we kind of got to that at the end. Like security is a journey. You better be on that journey. We know that you better be on that journey. The second thing that really stood out to me was, and I just sort of know this working with you, this is hard. And part of the reason it's hard is because you think about a police officer, you think about the people accessing this data, super, super sensitive data. It has to be readily available when that end user needs it, and they're accessing it in really weird ways, right? Compared to a normal person that's sitting behind a desk in a lot of cases. So being able to support that and that's, I think, what's sort of driving some of the stats that we saw in this report that you were referencing in terms of why this is a challenge, but also there are really big end user benefits that we can go drive to if we go get this right. And with that, we'll move on to our conversation with Jax.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to have this great crowd together. I want to introduce Jax, who is the actual Director of Cybersecurity at Hamilton County, Ohio. Who's a great partner of ours, and we were excited to have her on the podcast with us today to find out how her approach and her agency approach cybersecurity and dealing with CJIS Compliancy 6.1. So, Jax, how about tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's get started.
Yeah. So good morning. Thank you so very much for having me. So I am Jacqueline Ray. Most people call me Jax. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity for Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. So not for all of Hamilton County, but We do obviously interface with Hamilton County and all of the other mission critical systems. I was really brought in to help build and mature the cybersecurity program across, identity and endpoints, policy awareness and response, and obviously focus on CJIS compliance. And thank you so much for having me today, because I really think what makes public safety different is that we operate around the clock, right? We're not only asking whether security control protects the information right now, it's whether it works at a patrol car or a shared workstation or at 2 a.m. So this is really great to talk about CJIS compliance and cybersecurity. I love to always nerd out about that stuff. So thank you again.
Awesome. Well, why don't you just start maybe by, when you say CJIS compliance, what is CJIS compliance? What does that really mean? And give a brief overview.
Yeah, so I can really nerd out about that, right? But that's criminal justice information security, and that's a subset of NIST. I spent 17 years in the Department of Defense, and the FBI really came in and said, how do we protect criminal justice information? And really just a set of, prescriptive controls. It was, I think, before 5.1 was not as prescriptive as the NIST controls. And now it's really getting to the weeds. It's telling in user organizations and cybersecurity professionals in CJIS environments how to apply the controls and what the standards are. And I really like that they just changed it 6.1 or 7.1 that's coming out in 2027, saying we need to implement now. So, really kind of hammering down those things, saying like, you must have MFA. This how you must protect data. You must encrypt it in the back end. So it's really that prescriptive controls on how we handle criminal justice information.
How we handle criminal justice information, and then how would people sort of give a sense to how would people access that information? So we're putting these security controls in place. Who are the actors, for lack of a better way to put it, and sort of what mechanisms are they using?
Yeah, so we have obviously lots of first responders. You have to think about 911, right? There's these databases. Unfortunately, if you're calling 911, it's probably the worst moment. Hopefully, no one has to do it. But if you do, that has your address, that information, that's protected data. Or if there's a criminal investigation, if I'm a detective and I have information about a suspect, or unfortunately, if we make poor decisions and you come to visit me at Hamilton County Sheriff's Office, right, and we give you a nice free stay, that is protected criminal justice information. And so not only do we use it amongst in the county level, but in the regional level, and then it moves up into the FBI and shared across the United States level, so that we can do things like if there is a manhunt, or say there is crime being committed in Ohio, that detectives can have a signature and have that information possibly in New York. And so it's very valuable that we share that information. So not only are we using it in the local level, it's being shared across the United States, and then sometimes international partners as well.
That's great. So this is obviously really sensitive information that needs to be protected. What are some of the biggest challenges you see, I guess, with the police officers with those when they're trying to access this data? Is there, obviously as Imprivata, we care about shared environments. Is there something specific there that makes this more of a challenge than maybe some of the other verticals, industries that we work in?
Oh, 100%. We're on the go, and we're 24/7, right? So we're not only talking about sitting down at a desk, kind of just badge in and sit at a desk and log in and be like, okay, I'm going to look up some fingerprints. No, we're talking about officers, possibly intelligence officers in a patrol car at a traffic stop, needing to get access to fingerprints, needing to get access to records. I need to be able to possibly, if I'm working in a jail facility and I need to access possibly HIPAA type medical records for an inmate because he possibly had a seizure. These are very dynamic and different for each mission in each area. When you talk about criminal justice, there's going to be, when you talk about running a jail, or even, on Hamilton County, there's just so many different varieties of way we access this information and how it be used and how vital it is and mission critical. And it's 24/7. I think is a lot of the challenges. And, on the technical side, they've been around for a long time. So as the report notes, is, legacy systems and, operational friction as always kind of gets in the way as well.
Yeah, it's our bread and butter, right? So super, super sensitive data that people have to have access to. And then really, I don't want to say weird, that's not the right word, but different interfaces, for lack of a better way to put it, that we continue to have to go through and support. If you think about a police car versus I'm inside a precinct versus, wherever. And so it does create a pretty big challenge for us. So I guess, where do we sort of stand today, maybe as a country, if you took a step back and said just the U.S. in general, and I guess, this is a U.S. specific thing that we're solving for, right? So where do we stand today as a country in sort of solving this? If you could give a quick overview of that.
Well, I mean, just, reading, it looks like Imprivata did a survey, and from reading that is that we're kind of struggling. And I would say it's not because of negligence. I think, unfortunately, it is because we're not understanding all those mission critical priorities and all the different layers it takes to get access. Because when we talk about accessing this criminal justice information, there might be some of it on my local system, but also that means I have to log in my system, and then I log into another system, right? And they do it all talk to each other. They're not all set up for modern authentication. There's all these different challenges. So I think that when we talk about just, okay, here's this prescriptive controls, here become CJIS compliant, it's just not that easy, right? Because we don't always have the systems or the resources or the people, or I'll be honest with you, and I think that I'm just not sharing too much about Hamilton County, but they're all dedicated officers. Anybody that I meet, they've worked there 26 years. I'm the new kid on the block. I am new to town. I'm just learning. Everybody is got their way of doing business. So now you've got this, cyber nerd coming in and saying, no, you can't have this short password. No, you can't do these things. We have to meet these. There's going to be some operational friction, but it's my job, right, to understand that and to put a tool in place, something in place that because they'll circumvent it, right? As we'll say in Jurassic Park, right? They will find a way.
Yes, absolutely. Jax, one thing I wanted to kind of approach with you, and I've got great respect for you, by the way. Thank you for what you've done there in Hamilton County. I typically coming from a public safety background. The sworn side, the admin command staff typically says, hey, this is an IT problem. And when it comes to CJIS compliance, especially 6.1, and you're right, 7.0 is coming out soon, it needs to be approached, in my opinion, as a mission, right? And it's not an IT problem, it's an agency problem. I'd love to hear how you walk through that, because clearly that was your approach.
Yeah, very much so. So I will just say my past career had a really bad taste in my mouth for cybersecurity personnel coming in and just saying no, and these are the rules, and this is how we're gonna do it. Because once again, right, to quote Jeff Goldblum, they will find a way. They're gonna circumvent you, and they're also not gonna trust you, right? They're not going to believe when I say, hey, do this, it's easy, like just do these things. They're not gonna trust me. So I took my time. I worked with my CIO. Andy Beckman was wonderful. And there was a deadline for CJIS compliance. And I said, for MFA, and I said, you know what, we're not ready yet. I need to understand the organization. So I really did try to take the top-down approach, speak to leadership, speak to the commissary, speak to how my 24/7 correction staffs do it, speak to intelligence, speak to patrol, and understand their mission and see, okay, if I put the solution in place, how is that going to affect them? And how do I, kind of make the carrot, right? And what are the risks and the rewards, right? How can it be circumvented? How is I going to make it easier for them? And really think about the mission, not just my cybersecurity mission, but the organizational mission. And also, sometimes in cybersecurity, we do impede the mission, right? We think we're helping. We think we're like, oh, we're locking it down, but we can't impede the mission. And that was the last thing I wanted to do. So that was really my approach, is that I wanted to put a secure solution in place that supported the mission, not impeded it. And so that was, and it seemed to work out for me, but it took time, and it's not always easy to understand. And I can't be honest with you and say I fully understand, but I did try. I took the time to go out and talk and, do some demos and do some beta tests. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great approach. We try to advise here, at Imprivata, we recognize that CJIS compliance is not a one fix, it's a journey, right? And it's a never ending journey, because you have compliance changes based on technology and the environment we operate in. So it is a journey, and our goal at, obviously here, like working with you, is find out where you're at in that journey and start getting you to on the right path. So I really appreciate your approach, and that's a great word of advice to other command staff, that they need to tackle this just like they do discovering trends and patterns in crime, right? It's a mission, and it's something that has to be a practice. You're only as strong as your weakest practitioner, right? And everybody at that agency has compliance responsibility.
Yeah, I think previously CJIS compliance was looked at like the auditor's coming, the auditor's coming. Let's do all the paperwork. Let's figure out the templates. And that's really where, 7.0 is really like, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to hand you the template and you just fill your name in. And I think this is important for tools like Imprivata to come in and really to enable organizations because, yes, for a long time, it really has been looked at as a checkbox and the compliance piece. And now, nope, CJIS it's a real thing. It's necessary, right? I can go on all day about AI and, moving towards zero trust, but it's something that it's not an option anymore. And so it's great to know that there are solutions out there that you can put in place that one are easy, if you really think about your organization. I'm not saying, this, I found one that worked for my organization, but, easy in that, your staff can trust you after that. Because now I feel like that I put something in place when I say I'm going to do something, there's a little bit of trust there because it's like, oh, okay, because I did something really mean before I put my solution in. I said, hey, I think there's some bad password hygiene. I made them go to minimum 20 character passwords, right? I said, so I, this was maybe a little psychological piece for, they're like, okay, I love this new solution because that's way easier than that minimum 20 characters passwords. But, you got to get creative.
That's actually a great story. I think it's universal is just give the carrot and the stick, right? And it's sort of, hey, we got to go solve for this. So walk through that journey a little bit more, like how did you start, for lack of a better way to put it? So you've got a pretty big set of controls that you got to go implement, right? Yeah. Sort of walk through, this is where we started. How did you get the buy-in? If that was what you did there, great. Sort of, what was your approach?
I think it's really, once again, is through my journey, one, just for the IAM piece, understanding the organization, going and looking at how we move information, how we access CJIS data, how we share CJIS data. It was eye-opening because, once again, these systems have been around for a long time. And once again, no one was negligent. It's just CJIS was looked at as a checkbox and a compliance. And so going in and saying, okay, where's the risk here? Really, where's the immediate need? And putting controls in place like that. So we'll just say now, we have a patching schedule and a vulnerability management piece. And, that's all a part of CJIS, it was vaguely there, but now it says you must do that because understanding your risks. If you don't understand your mission, then you don't understand your threat landscape and understanding your assets, because I think that's where we kind of get into dangerous territory, is that we don't really fully understand what we have, not just even assets, but data. That's how it leaks out, right? That's how we have the rogue server that gets exploited and then they get into my organization. So just that baseline, CJIS maps to the CIS control. Number one, baseline, asset management, right? So that's number one, tried to tackle asset management. What do we have? Then let's clean it up. Right. Let's lessen our threat landscape. Anything that's public facing. Do we really need it? Pull it offline. And then looking at the way we handle data and with our mission partners, let's say our prosecutors, there's sensitive data that has to go to court for evidence, making that secure, meeting CJIS compliance with encrypted, hard drives, just looking at it from all those facets, not just the cybersecurity piece where that's kind of where my mind was going in, but okay, kind of get into that investigator, criminal justice side at all the facets. So really, looking at all pieces of the mission. So I tried to approach it, and it's a work in progress. I'm not, I don't have all the answers here. It's a work in progress,
So that makes a ton of sense though. So you basically identify your data, you identify what you need to do from, I would call this the security 101, right? It doesn't just have to be identity. So how do we make sure that we're storing and transmitting data in a secure way? Great. And then I'm sure at some point we do start layering sort of the identity pieces on top of that. So who did you work with, I guess, across, who were your stakeholders that you worked in? How did you engage with them? Sort of what did you do on that front to drive what you needed to do from an identity perspective?
Yeah. So once again, it was, working with my CEO was really great and just kind of trying out solutions, I won't name any names, but we tried out these, other solutions before we got to Imprivata. And it was like, okay, well, this works here, but it's not maybe CJIS compliance, or this works here, or maybe we don't have the resources to management, right? So maybe it's cheaper, it's less expensive. We have the resources, but it takes 4 people to manage it. So really understanding not just, okay, I'm meeting compliance. Let's buy this tool. Let's put it in place, set it and forget it. that's not realistic. So understanding, okay, what does it realistically look like to maintain it? Not just from the first year purchase, from resources and manpower, but over time, right? Because we're talking about possibly a token, a badge system, and all those pieces falling in place. What does that look like when I'm 24-hour patrol officer? What does that look like if I'm a corrections officer? What if it looks like if I work in the commissary? How can I then make that a little bit easier? Worked with, luckily, there's some cool technology. So now we have a piece, we'll just say, gets me into all the resources I need to with one, particular token. And so, having that carrot and also cleaning up some other processes. There was maybe some processes that were maybe not CJIS compliant behind that, and saying, okay, if I can fix that too at the same time, it's even a winner. But really understanding, engaging, when I say stakeholders, everybody has a different mission there. They're all my stakeholders, right? You run the kitchen, you're my stakeholder. You're the sheriff, you're my stakeholder. Obviously, she's who I answer to. But that's really important because I have a mission. We all support the bigger mission, but they're going to be a little bit different. So I think that's really the only approach, because at the end of the day, somebody will, I'm not saying that my system doesn't somehow get circumvented or you try to circumvent it, but try to approach it where, okay, the path of least resistance, we'll say.
And I'm assuming you sort of also tied that back to that asset inventory you were talking about, right? Yeah. So what I'd be a little curious about is just from your perspective and just, you've got your most critical assets, your highest risk assets, your most sensitive assets, whatever sort of that tier 0, tier 1 category. How did you approach balancing those versus sort of that idea of friction and getting access to those resources? And I guess the other thing is the modalities, right? One of the things I think of a lot is a police officer's got a lot of different places where they got to get to this data quickly. Mm-hmm. And sort of your approach to rolling that out, how you thought about it, what that looked like.
Yeah. So just, understanding those different pieces, because they were going to look different everywhere else. And so I think having a solution, there's different ones. Like, right. So when we talk about AI, AM and access, right, we have different options. We'll just say we have a Microsoft, or sure. Azure, trying to be as vague as, but try to give the meat, but be vague, right?
I think Microsoft, you're probably pretty safe to throw that one out there.
Microsoft piece, right? And then IAM, but really try to be forward thinking about zero trust. And when you talk about those critical assets, then because everybody's going to think critical assets are different. When I started having this conversation with the IT team, Active Directory is a critical asset, right? But if I talk to my sheriff, my system that runs my jail is critical mission. It is a mission critical asset because that's her job. She's an elected official. She's responsible for up to 1,000 human beings in that jail facility, not on top of my personnel, and so that's mission critical. So understanding how those pieces interact and how do I put a solution in place that now I have it doesn't meet obviously zero trust 100%, but it is working towards that. So now I know who accessed it, when they accessed it, right? We have that governance and awareness piece. And so, we did a little bit of also, hardening when it talks to more critical assets, but really just getting that ability to be able to do that, which we didn't have before, was just, I think, one of the big, stepping stones and just identifying those critical assets. I don't have any magic formula for how approaching that. Is just one, we had to identify that, but now knowing if I put this in place, at least I have an idea who did what, where, and when, and then, with what. And then on top of, we have other modalities to be able to do some, logging and identity access management, which is great.
Yep. So identifying resources, finding users, understanding how they're accessing the pieces, and then sort of doing the mapping and bringing those pieces together. In terms of actual, you talked about the big bad auditor. I used to work for an auditing firm, so I actually think auditors are great. They'll work with you, but I get the nomenclature, I get the perception. But one of the things I think are you thinking about and are you measuring sort of end user satisfaction and some of the day in the life of the user? What does it look like? Are you providing productivity gains on that front, and do you have KPIs around that? So just sort of give me a sense of what you're doing on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, it's really we watched the numbers with obviously our Imprivata solution. It was really great to see enrollment numbers, watching them enroll, being able to use. There's a password, self service password reset, which is nice. Watching, so we talk about KPIs because of there was other not necessarily KPIs that were written in stone, but I think from my kind of dashboard is that on top of my solution was a kind of a password manager. And my goal for, end of 2025 was death to the password. And so with my solution, it kind of gave me this password manager piece. We also were doing some back end on passwords that were being found in the wild, passwords that were being, found in different breaches. And I watched those. I've seen those numbers go down. I've seen my help desk tick numbers for password resets go down. And then just kind of going out into the community and be like, hey, how do you like it? And honestly, I'll get some feedback and saying, hey, I hadn't had to take this out of my wallet for 26 years and they're unhappy. And then some people are like, I love it. It's so nice because, you made us have this long password and now this is so convenient. And so really, I think as far as user satisfaction, people are very happy because it is, it was new, right? Change is new, but I think overall the solution from, taking the perspective and really taking the whole organization into consideration really paid off in that respect. And I'm seeing it not only in the user satisfaction, but the risk back end, which I was concerned about first coming into organization, is lessening that risk, right? If they don't remember their password, they can't reuse it somewhere else and they don't make my organization vulnerable. If they don't have a password to log in, they don't have a password, they can't reuse it to possibly, someone phish or pick up off of the internet to make my organization more vulnerable. So I look at it just in that risk register there, I'm winning out.
It comes down to one of the risks is always, hey, again, the feds are famous for this, right? They put compliance on you. There's a cost to compliancy. There's a cost to implementing products, right? And even changing behavior, there's a cost. Were you able to apply and receive grants and other funding capabilities to be able to move forward on the project? If you could, just to kind of explain how you approach that, because that's a big thing. As I travel around, the agency say, hey, we'd love to be compliant. We're out of funds. We don't have the funding for this.
Yeah. No, that is really difficult. And I have to say, I'm very, like I said, very fortunate to have, I think there was a big turn of the tide. Sheriff McGuffey, she's fantastic. And she said she wants to be the most technologically advanced sheriff's office in Ohio. And so we were actually, we were resourced, not well resourced. And I was cybersecurity, so IT was resourced because our CIO came in. And so I did look at some of the grant funding, and I'll be honest with you, grant funding's great, but it gets tricky, right? Like UOSCI and DHS, because you might get funded, but you don't get paid out because DHS doesn't want to grant that grant for 3 years. So I know that we still have grants from 2023 that's still not been fully paid out, and there's no promise for next year. So what we did actually is that I said to myself, once again, understanding that we have mission partners, I actually did go to 2 other mission partners that we interface with quite a bit. We'll just say that, maybe take care of some of the patrol officers, pieces, as well as maybe some emergency management. And so we went in together and kind of did a bulk price. And that's kind of where, honestly, we could really be resourced because we are a small agency in consideration, as far as budget wise. And we went together, but it works out well because in coordination, now my officers can maybe have one token that gets into several systems because we're shared with multiple agencies. And I've actually approached other agencies in Hamilton County. Once again, resources are, limited, but that's the goal, is that we kind of have this single solution because not only for troubleshooting and support, but now we know we can trust it, right? We have that identity access policy, right? We've got that accountability, who accessed, when we accessed it, and then just that shared resource.
That's interesting. Yeah, I get it. Well, and again, like you said, there's multiple grant funding opportunities out there. Some are matching grants. Some are just meant to be a seed grant, and then you have to pick it up after, right? So, one of the other thing I would, I know that, and, thank you ahead of time. And I believe you're going to be with us at ICP, which is going to be great. I'm looking forward to that. if you were to advise other agencies on timing and when to act, typically public safety is 11th hour when it comes to things like this. They get the email from CJIS and it sits in the in the junk box until they start getting the threat letters, right? And you and I both know, coming from public safety, the FBI is not going to cut out access to NCIC unless they're absolutely abusing it. But there are other things they will do, right? They'll cut off grant funding if they have it capable. They have that already, and those type of things. What would you recommend as far as an agency today that finally says, hey, this is a problem for us? They need to get started now, right? Even if they don't have the full funding, how would you suggest they start that project?
Yeah, I think probably starting small, like I said, is just, even so you've got CJIS, right, which maybe might feel overwhelming if you don't have it. Go to CISA and go to control set, the first rate control sets. They map directly to CISA, and they're kind of the basic ones. And the number one says asset management, right? So start with the basics, because I think maybe in bigger and smaller agencies looking at your survey, is that we all live with legacy systems, and we all live with, resource constraints, like you were saying, and it feels very overwhelming. So I think really just starting at the basics is where you have to be. Understand your mission, know what your data is, understand your assets, and then slowly start applying those controls. Because a policy, you can make quickly, but really think about the implementation. Don't just write the policy because CJIS says, oh, you must do it this way. Go and understand, if you can, take the 15, 20 minutes, sit down with whoever owns the process and put the policy in place that will actually be followed. Not just, once again, meeting the checkbox when it comes to auditor time, but you're actually putting a cybersecurity program. You're actually implementing that control in place properly. So, don't be overwhelmed, start small, but really I think the fundamental basics is knowing, what your assets are, doing the basic, risk register, and, don't let, legacy systems. We're all here for you. This is nothing new. We've all heard it. Maybe I still see it, compliance is not something you prepare for in a week, right? Cybersecurity is, like they would say, or even a program is like stale our bread, right? It gets stale quickly. I used to live on the Monterey Peninsula. Boy, did I know that, right? Only lasted 2 days. But that's how cybersecurity is. And especially with AI, even Patch Tuesdays going away, right? I just was talking to my students about, hey, has it affected your patching schedule? So, there's the old adage, at least in cyber, it's not if, it's when. So, let's not be reactive. Let's be as proactive as we can, because it's really a necessity at this point.
Totally agree with you. It's not a nice to have, it's a gotta have now, right?
Yeah.
And I think every agency needs to look at that from that perspective. So that's great. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your insight and sharing with us what you've done there with your agency. And I'm looking forward to working more with you in the future, because it's truly an educational process now with most agencies, especially, but it's typically IT are involved because they get the notice first. But now the ugly emails are starting to go to the chief and sheriff, and now they're going, hey, where are we on CJIS compliancy? And 6 months ago, they didn't even know what CJIS compliancy was, right? Yeah. So I appreciate. One thing I would ask, maybe for our listeners that don't have the advantage of having a JAX, what would be a good way to get started? Other resources? I've always been one to say, hey, you know what? If I always try to strengthen my weaknesses, and part of it is I would lean into the FBI. A lot of people just run from the Bureau. I would lean into them. If I was a smaller agency and didn't have a JAX, I would pick up the phone and call my supervising agent in my area and say, hey, we need some advice and help on CJIS compliancy. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And there are really great resources. There's especially if you're a local government, I know the government has kind of cut it, but there's CISA, right? If you're a local, there's resources there. They'll come in, and I don't know what they do now, but at one point it was free. They'll monitor your network traffic for you. They'll give you known IOCs. If you don't even have that, if you just have a firewall, there is all kinds of resources. I just say I'm a Californian. I'm new to Ohio 2 years. I am blown away and impressed. Ohio has so many cyber resources. There's the cyber range. There's the cyber. I was just at this really great live action cyber thing at Xavier University. There are a lot of resources, but I think, just at minimum going to your TAC within your organization, and they can get you in touch with the FBI, or, hey, just send an email to, I'm sure there's something on the CJIS website, a generic email, or, reach out to somebody, I can give my email address and I can point you to a resource, but or start basic at CISA, right? the basic controls. There's the A, B, and C, the tier 1, 2, and 3. If you're smaller, small resources, you start there. Just so it doesn't seem overwhelming, because I have worked with a lot of agencies, even smaller countries, and this feels like, where do I start? Heaven forbid they kick off a Nessus scan in their environment, and it just, the Christmas tree lights up and they don't know what to do. So I think, just having some guidance. So I think that's fantastic. See what FBI has. CISA is great. Ohio has plenty of resources, and check whatever state or area you're in. They might have that. And there are really great, grants. If you want to get into cybersecurity, go and get that Security Plus, get that baseline. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And I would suggest agencies too, they have a university within their jurisdiction, partner with them, right? They're a great resource as well when it comes to this. So Jax, I can't thank you enough for being here. I know I speak from everybody here at Imprivata. We truly enjoy your partnership with us. It's very encouraging to see a proactive agency such as yourself, and your leadership has obviously taken seed, and you guys are doing a great job. Is there anything else that you want to leave with our listeners as far as, the do's and don'ts and that type of thing?
No, I just want to say thank you so very much. And that once again, we're all here in solidarity. This is not the first time or the last time. I think anyone on this call, we fully understand being under budget, under resources. I'm not sitting here from some sort of high pedestal. I might go back and talk about some Windows, server. We all have those legacy. We all have those uphill battles. You're not alone. And I think that's really great. Thank you so very much for mentioning the resources, but start small. But we need more people cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, right? It's not just, when we talk about putting these policies in place, I expect my team, my organization to respect those and to understand that, if you violate this or you do this, you put the whole organization at risk. So really, embodying that and moving forward, and it's hard, but if you can create a culture of respect for cybersecurity, serious awareness, one, call me and tell me how to do it. But, that's really what we're all kind of pushing for, right? Because we want everybody to kind of feel that same, not the same way, but that same responsibility on their shoulders. If I click that link, that's what the implications to my organization.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Just getting the cyber word out there. And once again, Imprivata, this has been fantastic. Thank you for let me nerd out for, 40 minutes. This is what I do best.
Well, thanks very much again for joining, and appreciate the conversation. And obviously we appreciate the partnership. So till next time, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Take care. We'll see you soon.
See you.
If today's conversation got you thinking about where your agency stands on the road to CJIS 6.1 compliance, we invite you to continue the discussion with us during our upcoming webinar with Police One on Wednesday, September 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll take a deeper dive into the practical strategies for building a sustainable compliance program ahead of the October 1st, 2027 deadline. You can find the registration link in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and follow Access Point on your favorite podcast platform. We also welcome your feedback. Please send us any thoughts, insights, or suggestions to accesspointpodcast@imprivata.com or find us on LinkedIn.